Want to take a moment at the beginning of this video to let you know that we are on Instagram, and what you're seeing on Instagram is very different. It's a lot of the behind the scenes pictures, photos, and videos of things that we wouldn't put in our video necessarily, but we put them there because that's our experience. That link is below. Welcome to a series called The End of Times, where we're going through the book of Revelation verse by verse to see what it is we should expect to happen. But more importantly, what it is we should be doing, because what it is we're doing matters according to the lips of Jesus, and a lot of people just believe. They could just say something when they were younger and then be saved and do whatever they want, live in the world and live for themselves, and somehow Jesus Christ is just going to put a big old crown of glory on their heads and say, "Good job, faithful servant." But we are told to pick up our cross and follow Him. And as we've gone through this book of Revelation, we've reached that place where not only has Christ returned, but now we're at the end of the 1,000 years, the millennium of Him reigning on earth as He does in heaven. And at the end of that 1,000 years, Satan is released from the bottomless pit, and immediately he deceives the nations. And an army, the Gog and Magog War, begins because a massive army of several countries arises to take and plunder financially Jerusalem. Now, for the people, it's financial. For Satan, it's about destroying human lives and killing Jesus. But God is never going to let Jesus die again. He literally will sit on the throne, sit there as a man on the throne in Jerusalem for 1,000 years. And what we would have been doing during that time is we would be working with our hands, being provided everything we need, but we have to do it with our hands, just like Adam and Eve did. They just weren't told the buffet is open. They had to go work the ground, but they were given the resources that they needed to survive, and that's where we would be. No need to buy anything, no need to exchange, no need for anything, just self-sufficiency around the world, with the occasional pilgrimage to Jerusalem to see the king. Now, with that being said, after the 1,000 years, the way God manipulates this army is the same thing He did the 1,000 years earlier with the Antichrist, which is the same thing He did biblically to Jehoshaphat. This is what God does. This is how He wins wars for you, is He gathers all of them together. He puts hooks in them, pulls them to Jerusalem, and then He smites them in one moment, all of them together in one place. That's how He does it. It's the same thing He's going to do here. But this Gog and Magog War, most people that talk about the Gog and Magog War in Ezekiel 39 and 40 or 38 and 39, they act like they don't know when that war is. Like, well, it says there's this war, but when is this war? Well, it clearly says, I haven't read Revelation 20, it clearly says it's at the end of the millennium. Satan is released, a new army arises. And keep in mind also, which we've talked about the last several episodes, is over that 1,000 years, there's going to be new generations of people being born. People will be engaging in marriage. People will be having children and raising families. So you'll have people born after the 1,000 years that don't remember anything that happened 1,000 years, because maybe they're 400 or 500 years old. Whereas in those of us who were here when Jesus returns, we saw the whole thing. We experienced the whole millennium. So by the time this uprising happens, we already have seen this coming. So with that being said, we're just going to pick it up where we left off, Revelation 20, starting verse 7. Now when the 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the breadths of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. It's that simple. He put hooks in them and pulled them down, and then He just rained fire down on them and killed them all in one moment. But Ezekiel gives great detail, and it's very important we have this detail. Because as we are experiencing the rise of the Antichrist and the beast system before Christ returns, we have great detail on what that looks like. That way, as humans, we can say, well, wait a second, the Bible's told us to be careful of this thing over here. Well, it's very important that we have that at the Gog and Magog War as well, because in the Gog and Magog War, that's 1,000 years later, but a lot of people are going to fall for it. They're going to be deceived. So how do we not be deceived? Just like with the Antichrist was deceived, just like the beast system and all those people that took the mark, just like they were deceived, Gog and Magog is going to deceive them as well. So with that all kind of put together, what you have to understand is it's important that we have detail into what this looks like, because the best reference to the Bible is the Bible. And talking about the Gog and Magog War, we won't know what that looks like based on what we just read here. So we have to go back to Ezekiel to see what it looks like. So when we hit that moment in time, our minds can say, well, wait a second, God warned us about this thing. Which is another reason why it's very important you focus on what it is you're doing throughout your whole life. So we're going to go back to Ezekiel. We spent yesterday in Ezekiel kind of talking about how God puts his hooks into these armies and pulls them down. And we're going to stay in Ezekiel for at least 2 more episodes, or at least we'll try to wrap it up this episode as best we can. But he pulled them in, and now what we're going to see is how he devours and destroys them. So if you haven't checked out last episode, check that out, then come back. We're going to pick it up where we left off. Ezekiel 38, starting in verse 14. Therefore, son of man, prophesy and say to Gog, thus says the Lord God, on that day when my people Israel dwell safely, will you not know it? Then you will come from your place out of the far north, you and many peoples with you, all of them riding horses, a great company and a mighty army. You will come up against my people Israel like a cloud to cover the land. It will be in the latter days that I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me, when I am hallowed in you, O Gog, before their eyes. Thus says the Lord God, are you he whom I have spoken in former days by my servants, the prophet of Israel, who prophesied for years in those days that I would bring you against them? And there's that piece that's important. It was prophesied so we know. It's important, because are you the one that the prophets talked about? Is what they're asking. Let's keep going. And it will come to pass at the same time when God comes against the land of Israel, says the Lord God, that my fury will show on my face. For my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath I have spoken. Surely in the day there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel, so that the fish of the sea, the birds of heaven, the beasts of the field, all the creeping things that creep on the earth, and all men who are on the face of the earth shall shake at my presence. The mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. I will call for a sword against Gog throughout all my mountains, says the Lord God. Every man's sword will be against his brother, and I will bring him to judgment with pestilence and bloodshed. I will rain down on him, on his troops, and on many peoples who are with him, flooding rain, great hailstone, fire, and brimstone. Thus I will magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations. Then they shall know that I am the Lord. Now I want to take a moment and kind of just reflect on what we just read. Because it's important, as I said earlier, we have to be able to see this. Because I'm going to go back and start in 21. I will call for a sword against Gog throughout all my mountains, says the Lord God. Every man's sword will be against his brother, and I will bring him to judgment with pestilence and bloodshed. So before even the fire comes down, because the nations have been deceived, and again, I hope you watched last episode, because I don't want to get too deep into what we talked about last time. But the general idea is that when the deceiver is gone, when he's gone for 1,000 years, the human will not desire to kill, murder, steal, rob, fornicate, none of that. Because we are convinced of that. We are deceived that that is what our body needs. We are deceived that that is what our spirit and our soul needs. But that is what leads us straight to hell, and that's what leads to death. And that's what Satan is doing. He's trying to destroy mankind, but God knows their heart. And he knows the hearts of the people. So those who are being deceived, he's going to let them be deceived. Those who are rising up with Gog, he's going to let them rise up with Gog. Those who are against Gog, he's going to let brother kill brother, because it's the deceiver doing it all, and he's allowing it because there will still, just like when the Antichrist reigned, there will be a remnant. There'll be a remnant of people, and they're all going to gather into Jerusalem because they're seeing everybody starting to kill each other. We've gone 1,000 years without a single murder on the earth, a single death on the earth, and suddenly everybody is killing each other. You have this massive army building up in the northeast, and people coming from all the four corners of the world to join that massive army, and meanwhile they're just killing everything in their wake like locusts. Also, brother is rising against brother, and because they're picking sides, just like they did with the Antichrist. It's the same thing. The deceiver is the same. God is the same. The only thing that is different is 1,000 years has passed. It's the only difference. It's the exact same then as it will be when Gog takes place. The Gog and Magog War. And it's very important we start to open our eyes, because 1,000 years of peace, and then suddenly it's not there anymore. It'll be easy to be deceived, because most of the strength that you have in your spirit and soul came from hardships of your life. And you know that to be true. So when you live 1,000 years, and especially if you were born in that 1,000 years, you've never seen hardship ever. You don't even know what hardship looks like. And when you see all these people acquiring the goods with their own hands, there's going to be this deception of, well, why would I work with my hands when I could just go take from all those people who are working with their hands, be leader over them, be their king, and then they work for me, which is how the world has been since the beginning. It's just the desire, the deception is to go right back to the way it was. But God's not going to handle that way. He's going to put hooks in Gog and pull him down and rain fire down on everybody. And these mountains that are falling, we're going to get into that, because the earth is going to fade away in that moment. Then the new earth comes about. It's kind of a freaky time, to be honest. I'm glad Jesus will be here, because when the Antichrist and the beast system and all those earthquakes are taking place, he's not here. At least when Gog and Magog comes, he's here. So we will gather to him in Jerusalem as we see the world on fire. And we will be safe there. We will be safe there with the King. And as they approach Jerusalem, they're just going to burn up from the fire from heaven. So with that, let's go back and read. And we are definitely going to come back to this, because we want to go into detail on how God destroys these armies. And how they're buried, kind of what takes place afterwards, because it's very important that we understand it. It's the only detailed prophecy of what takes place after the 1,000-year reign and before the earth is decreated. So there's, if we just base this on Revelation, we got, 4 verses on it. So we have to go back. We have to go back and see what this looks like. And Ezekiel is the best example of that. So we're going to stay in 38 and 39. We'll kind of get into the detail of this, because again, if we didn't know about the Antichrist, and we didn't know about the mark of the beast, and we didn't know about the beast himself, if none of that detail was in here, we'd all fall for it. We'd all fall for it. But God gives us a warning. And this warning is just as important as the Antichrist, if not more, because it'll be easier to see people who have never had hardship in their life. And they see all of a sudden when the deceiver starts whispering in their ear, why would you work with your own hands when you could just take from the world and make them work for you? That's what it's all about. So let's go back and read what we read. Revelation 20, go back to 7. Now when 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison, and will go out to deceive the nations, which are in the 4 corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints, and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven and it devoured them. Next time we're going to kind of focus on what that looks like. But again, I just want to really try to drive home this idea that it's very important that we really begin to notice what it is we're kind of doing out in this world and really pay attention to these prophecies. Jesus Christ himself said he is the spirit of prophecy. It's very important we see this. It's not just reading a story and being like, well, that'll be terrible when that happens. It's about reading what's about to take place and understand that when you see it, you need to start making decisions in your life that are about your Father's business. And you need to start making decisions in your life that lead you to the side of the saints and not the side of the Antichrist. And then after the 1,000 years is over, we're just going to have to do it again. Do it again. But for me, that's a no-brainer. I already know what happens. The 1,000 years is a tick of a clock. After 1,000 years is expired, we will see people start to be deceived. We will begin to be deceived. We will start to feel this sinful nature again. Well, like, I don't care how righteous you are. After that 1,000 years are expired, when the devil starts whispering in your ear for the first time in 1,000 years, or the first time ever, because you were born in that 1,000 years, it's going to be way easier to deceive the nations than it was with the Antichrist. Way, way easier. So it's important we understand what it is we should be doing in the end times. So I hope this video helps. Any insight on any of that, definitely put that below. We'll just pick up where we left off next time. If you like this video, click like and subscribe. Feel called to support this channel through Patreon. That link is also below. But the most important part of this channel, we take prayer requests. So please don't ever hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.